Hello and welcome back to my channel where I like to review, research, and recommend books, mostly historical fiction, nonfiction, and true crime. So if you're a nosy person like me and that sounds like right up your alley, definitely subscribe to my channel. So before I dive too deep into this story, I always like to talk about the book first that got me going down this rabbit hole. Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. Now, why is this book so significant? This book tells honestly about a serial killer that was preying on children. Now, this is obviously a very dark history, and this is based off of a true person as well, Miss Georgia Tann, which I will get into. Now, this book itself, I would definitely give it about 4 stars. It follows these siblings that live on a shanty boat, and one day their parents leave, and then they are left to their own devices, and they were taken from their home, and they were taken to a place called the Tennessee Children's Home Society, which I'll also get into. And boy, oh boy, was there so many things that happen here. And they come into contact with Miss Georgia Tann herself. This book is definitely sad. It is hard to read, but the fact that it is based off of a lot of true things really piqued my interest and made me want to dive deeper into the story. So let's talk about it. So let's talk about life during this time and why they were considered orphans, if you will, or left to their own devices. Well, they grew up in a community called shanty boat community, if you will. What a shanty boat was basically a house that was on a boat. It was very small. It was mostly made for impoverished people. They were mostly on the Tennessee River. They were found in other places and also across Europe as well. This was very popular during the late 19th century and early 20th century. This was a very affordable way of living because they really didn't have to rely on anything. And so it was mostly homes for impoverished people. And obviously these became a huge thing during the Great Depression when a lot of people were left without work or evicted from where they were living to open up ways for dams, national water parks. So a lot of people needed a lot of housing really quick who didn't have a lot of money. Now, majority of these people that lived in these houses were miners, farmers, things that required a lot of labor that they could easily go from one place or another. And that's where the shanty boat came in, was that it was so easy for them to move up and down river to get to jobs that they needed to do. Now, obviously, with so many of other things, what happens, what makes it die out? The Industrial Revolution, the transportation. I mean, there's so many things that happened during this time. And mostly the thing was highways, railroad ways. Going up and down river really wasn't a need anymore. It was not the preferred way of transporting, and by the late 20th century, they had rerouted a lot of these waterways, so unfortunately, the rest of them were basically evicted from their shanty boats and made to figure something else out. Now we're actually going to talk about the Tennessee Children's Home Society and what it was. I really couldn't find when it opened, but I mean, it was your typical orphanage that had, unfortunately, very deplorable conditions and a lot of abuse happened. There was roughly about 5,000 children that came and went from this place. Babies were kept in sweltering conditions, and older children were pretty much drugged until they were adopted out. And a lot of the workers that worked in this place was pedophiles, sex addicts, so you can imagine all the abuse that they inflicted on these children. They also starved the children, locked them in closets. It was a lot that these children went through. And recently, they actually found an unmarked grave of about 20 children on the property. And unfortunately, even with those unmarked graves and probably many more out there, nobody was ever officially charged with any sort of crime during this entire thing, even when all these atrocities came about of what happened there. So let's talk about Miss Georgia Tann herself. Georgia Tann was actually born in 1891 in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Didn't know that. She was actually born Beulah George Tann, and they shortened it to Georgia Tann. She was a daughter of a very prominent judge, which she used a lot to her advantage. She really wanted to be like her father. She wanted to be a lawyer, she wanted to be a judge, but this was obviously during the time where women were not really allowed to hold those kind of positions. So she got into a quote-unquote normal job for a woman, which was social work. Yeah. She wanted to be a social worker. She actually started her career in Mississippi, but it ended very shortly because she was found taking children away from homes that were not necessary, mostly the impoverished people that really couldn't fight back. So she was fired and basically chased out of Mississippi. So she moved to Texas, and then in 1922, she actually adopted her first child. Then she adopted another daughter in 1943, which are rumors that they are actually more than a mother and daughter relationship, if you catch my drift. Believe it or not, this was actually quite common then during the same gender relationships. Was in order to, share property, things like that, they would basically adopt an adult. That way they could transfer titles, grants, whatever they needed to do. So it was actually quite a popular thing. Shortly after adopting the second daughter, she actually ended up moving to Memphis, where her father lived, and used his influence to finally get her a job at the Children's Home Society. She started this job in 1922 and was basically an assistant to the executive of the head of the entire building. And by 1929, using her manipulative ways, she actually staged a whole takeover and actually became the CEO, if you will, of this place. Now, during this time, adoption was not a huge thing, but in the 1920s, they started advertising it that it was a way to make you look a little higher up in society. So the rich of the rich could adopt. It was a statement, if you will, to adopt a child. So this really helped Tann kind of start her side business, if you will. They actually advertised that adopting a child not only moved yourself up in society, but it also helped prevent wars, divorces, abuse. They advertised it all different ways, saying that adopting was the answer for everything. Now, this was also during the time where there was kind of a eugenics program going on in the US, and it was also advertised that you want the best of the best babies. So Georgia Tann, she would advertise certain babies that had filled out these certain marks. Oh, this is the perfect baby, and she would charge the highest dollar amount for these babies. And the ones who did not make it to those marks, they were basically left alone. Yeah, they were basically left in their crib forever with no food or water. They were, quote unquote, taken care of. She would also lie to the adoptees about the child that they were adopting. She would give them a completely different backstory, so that way they weren't marked as not being a good enough child for them to adopt. And also during this time, this was also the time where baby formula started becoming very popular as well. So women that were not biological mothers to the babies, they could actually feed them as well. So this even boosted Tann's business tenfold. She was making money. And a lot of her clients were like politicians, actors, very high up people. It is believed in her 21 years there, she had roughly made about $1 million, but in today's money, about 11 million. Now, she didn't just do this operation all by herself. She had several people that she had on the side that helped her do all these things. Lawyers, doctors, even her own nurses, everything. Everybody was under her thumb. She also got her hands dirty too. She also used her huge black car, would drive around, especially in impoverished neighborhoods, saying, hey, I know your parents, they've been looking for you. How about you get in my car and I can take you to your parents? So she was not afraid to do it herself either. She also went around playgrounds, schools, preschools. I mean, she really targeted these areas, which is just absolutely disgusting. And the reason why she picked on lower class people was because they didn't have the means to fight back. They did not have the money. They did not know who they needed to contact to. So she hardly ever had to put up a fight in kidnapping these children. And the sad part is she also had a local judge that was also one of her friends, if you will. And he would purposely, whenever a widow or a single mother came into court, he would officially sign away their rights over to Tann, just like that. They could leave without their children, even though it had nothing to do with their children. They could lose their children if they ended up in the courthouse with this judge. And she also had a doctor that worked at a hospital, also under her payroll, and he would call her whenever an unwed mother or a impoverished mother, whatever, who just really didn't, in his eyes, have the means to take care of the baby. He would give her a call, and after birth, he would tell the lady, I'm so sorry, but your child passed away. But in reality, he would give the baby to Tann and leave. hours after the baby was born. Hours. And of course, what happened was Tann was not really capable of taking care of these children just hours after birth. She didn't have all the things. So unfortunately, a lot of these babies that were handed over to her in this kind of situation did not make it very long afterwards, after being taken from their mother. And due to this actually caused Memphis to be one of the highest rate of infant mortality because of her scam. In 1945, there was actually a dysentery outbreak in the Children's Home Society, and 40 to 50 children died because they didn't get any medical attention to help. Now, believe it or not, at this time, Tennessee actually had a fair amount that you could charge to adopt a child, which was $7 at the time, which in today's money would be about $75. However, Tann was doing anywhere from about $1,000 and up, which is about $10,000 in today's money, which I've never adopted. I definitely want to in the future, but from what I have heard, it costs way more than that in today's money to even adopt today. So I find it very hard to believe that you can adopt a child for less even today. And then during the investigation, when things were starting to find out, they actually found out she also had a side business doing this too. So it wasn't just children that were coming in into this home. It was also, she was doing this on the side as well. She had other clients, she had other businesses. She was a busy gal. And she would charge these people in her private business, she would charge them for travel fees, for homing these children, for going to their home visits. She was making money off of these people. She also targeted the Jewish communities as well, because a lot of people would not adopt out to Jewish families. So she also had a side business in there as well. And even after she had adopted out a child, she was not done making money off of you. She would come back months, even years later, blackmailing people, saying, hey, I need this money from you right now, or I'm going to tell all your business out there. So she, even afterwards, even when the child was gone, she still made money. And this was slowly when some people were starting to get suspicious, especially a new governor when he came to town. Something just didn't feel right, and an investigation had started and opened it up wide for the public to see. He was not hiding anything from the public's eye on this. And once Tann got wind that she was being investigated, she had her nurses start to remove children. You can probably guess how they removed some of the children in order to bring the population of the place down in order so it didn't look so bad when they were being investigated. And of course, shortly thereafter, Tann needed to be arrested now that everybody in the world knew about what she was doing. However, she died of cancer, literally right after it was released, all these atrocities. She died. She was never held accountable. Nobody was ever held accountable for these atrocities. And shortly thereafter, the home closed for good. I know this is just one in many horror stories when it comes to orphanages, which is why they're not really around anymore, especially since the foster system was created. But just reading some of these things, it just makes me so sad. And just, it's crazy how many of them there were, how many stories I have heard. There are actually several different groups now that actually help these family members find their lost family members, like their lost siblings, things like that. They spend a lot of time and energy into finding out who these people's families were and who they were before they were adopted and where they came from. So definitely let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. And if you have any book recommendations that are similar to this as well, I'm always, even if it's hard to read, I still like to read into it and get as much information as I can. Also, if you have more information to add, definitely comment that below as well.